Canon very recently released what might be the smallest DSLR ever made, the Canon Rebel SL3. Is this actually any good for YouTube video making? Let's find out. What's up everyone, I'm the Everyday Dad, and if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. So this DSLR is one of the smallest cameras I've ever seen. And this is the first DSLR that really is a combination of mirrorless technology and the standard mirrored camera world. And today we're gonna figure out how they achieved this and if this is a camera that you should consider getting if you are looking for something to upgrade your YouTube video. So who is the SL3 for? I think the SL3 is for people that are looking to get their very first camera. They wanna get a DSLR with a flip screen, has the ability to have an audio in jack, or somebody that's just looking to get a small camera that can travel with them anywhere. I mean, look how small this thing is. And this is about the same size as my Sony a6400, which is also a very small camera. If you're new to my channel, welcome. But there are 4 things that I think are the most important for the online content creator. We're gonna cover those today. First up is video quality. Next up is ease of use. Then we're gonna talk about fiddliness and is there an ecosystem? Like if you want to buy more than just this camera, if you want to invest in a system, because that's what cameras really are, they are systems, not necessarily just bodies, is there a place to grow with something like the SL3? So first off, let's talk video specs. So again, I mentioned this is a DSLR. What makes this a DSLR is that little mirror. Can you see that mirror right there? That's what makes this a DSLR. This has the 24.1 megapixel APS-C CMOS sensor from Canon. It also has the Digic 8 image processor. It has the ability, one of the rare abilities on their tiny DSLRs, this can record in up to 4K 24 frames per second. More on the video recording specs here in just a second because it is going to be contentious. And it can record in 1080p up to 60 frames per second. It has a 9-point autofocus system with Canon's amazing dual pixel autofocus, and a big upgrade of the SL3 over something like the SL2 is this has the eye autofocus that Canon just very recently released. Now, when I mention the video specs that we'll talk about here in a second, the big negatives with this camera and with the Canon EOS RP is this is missing 1080p at 24 frames per second. So if you are somebody that likes to shoot cinematic, if you're somebody that likes the aesthetic at 24 frames per second, I mean, there are people that like it. I'm currently dabbling with it myself. You will be unable to do that in 1080p with the SL3. Another big negative when you talk about 24 frames per second is this can shoot in 24 frames per second 4K, but you get a very big crop. And on top of that, you lose the dual pixel autofocus. And something else that I'm gonna show you right here, when it's in 4K, it has some horrific rolling shutter. Now, what is rolling shutter? Rolling shutter is like there's a certain read speed on the sensor, right? Like cameras don't just read the sensor all at once. It takes time to read it. And the slower that read speed is compared to the video recording, the more you'll get like wobbles in the video. So check this out. You can see what we've got right here. Here's the rolling shutter with 1080p 30. I mean, it's not great, but it's not terrible. Now let's move it over to 4K. Whoops. 4K, oh, look at that crop. Did you guys see that big old crop? Now let's try it. I mean, I can see this even on just like the screen here, which means it's pretty bad. So yeah, the rolling shutter on the SL3, especially if you're gonna do 4K, is not great. But if you do keep it stable, you do keep it static, that won't be as big of a deal. Something that's really cool about the SL3 that I don't know that I've seen on any other DSLR is you can set this to have a clean HDMI out. It actually has a setting inside of it that I'm gonna show you right now, where you can just straight up turn the HDMI to be clean. You don't have to do any kind of workaround. You don't have to turn off the autofocus. You don't have to do anything like that. It just works. So check this out. This is pretty cool. This is one of the coolest things. HDMI info display. You can do clean 4K or clean FHD. Like you can do it clean, just straight. That's incredible. Like I've never seen a Canon DSLR with that kind of ability. Look at that. There is no info on it. So you can do clean HDMI with the SL3. So if you want to use this as a live streaming camera, you could absolutely do that. It would be incredible for that. And one of the big benefits, we'll talk more about this in physical construction, but one of the big benefits of this camera body is it has a mini HDMI out. It doesn't have micro HDMI out. Like the Sony cameras, both of the Sony cameras we're currently recording on, the a7 III and the a6400, both have micro HDMI, which is the worst connection in my opinion. It's super fragile, it gets yanked out all the time. I like mini HDMI. If I can't have full HDMI, I would prefer mini HDMI. So it's awesome that this can do clean out and it has the mini HDMI port. Like that makes this one of the cheapest but best, like probably the best budget live streaming camera option currently on the market. Like, I'm very impressed with what this can do for that. And when it comes to the image quality, I think, you know, that's the benefit of Canon cameras, right? Is Canon cameras really just make it very easy to get good looking image out of it. I'm not gonna talk about very contentious things, but I think Canon cameras, and the SL3 is no different, make it very easy to just get a decent looking image quality straight out of the camera. This doesn't have anything like C-Log, this doesn't have any log profiles, it can't do 10-bit, I mean, it's a $500 DSLR, but the image quality looks great. The kit lens does have stabilization built into it. The body does not have IBIS. It does have Canon's digital image stabilization. We'll see more in the vlogging test here in a second. I think the stabilization works perfectly fine on this camera. I don't have any problems with the image quality coming out of the SL3. Something else that's awesome that you occasionally miss on these budget cameras is it does have a microphone jack right on the body itself. So it does have the flip screen, and you can get really good audio with great autofocus. So this could be an incredibly powerful camera if you're just trying to make quick online video. One of the negatives, and this is something that I said in the video on Monday, and it's kind of a shady thing that Canon did. If you see here, it's missing the universal pin connector. So the only way you can use, like if you use flash, the only flash you can use is the Canon proprietary. You can't use a third-party flash because they took out the connection, which I don't want to defend Canon here, but that's pretty shady to me. I wish they would have just left it in there, because why would you take it out? Right? Like, why would you take it out? Oh, and it has a flash. If you're a photographer, here, I'm gonna throw you a bone. It has a flash. I don't do a lot of photography. But don't take my word for it. Let's hop outside real quick for a video/vlogging test.
Welcome to the vlogging test of the brand new Canon Rebel SL3. Look at how tiny this thing is. It's like a tiny little vlogging portable powerhouse. Okay, vlogging test. Begin. Whoa, okay, let's not hit this table. Vlogging test begin. So this is the vlogging test of the Canon Rebel SL3. It's got the nice flip screen so I can see what's going on. I've got a very wide Tokina 11-16 lens on it so you can see everything. You can see this entire picnic area because that's what you want to see when you're vlogging, the giant picnic area. You know what else you can see? All of this gross rain out here because it's pouring down rain, which is why we're in this picnic area in the first place. But I think the camera's pretty light. It does a pretty darn good job today doing this vlogging stuff. It's a little bit smaller than the SL2. It's not any smaller than the M50. So would you prefer to have this or the M50 for vlogging? That's gonna be a personal choice. Do you like DSLRs or mirrorless? But I think it's doing a pretty good job. I find that the electronic image stabilization that Canon has, it's not the best. It doesn't replace like Panasonic level IBIS, but I think it does pretty darn good. I'm pretty impressed with it. I think the colors look great. I think the audio looks great. I think everything is doing pretty well, unless, like we already mentioned, you are a cinematic vlogger and you do everything in 24 frames per second. This does not do 1080p 24 frames per second, which, I don't know, that's like Canon's thing now, is they don't do 24 frames per second in anything. But I know we already talked about this, but I want to show it really quickly. The SL3 has Canon's brand new like eye autofocus in video, which is incredibly powerful. So look, this is the EOS R. So look, so this is the EOS R, and you can see that it's doing eye autofocus through my sunglasses. How crazy is that? That's awesome. The SL3 does the same thing. So here, let me turn you around. The SL3 does the same thing. Well, now it's not gonna do it. So it will do eye autofocus through sunglasses, which is awesome. I've had problems with other companies' eye autofocus not working when I have sunglasses on, so it's nice to see. I think it's a perfectly fine vlogging camera, unless you need that 24 frames per second. Okay. Back to the video.
Okay, and this is the indoor video test of the Canon Rebel SL3. Now we're currently not on the kit lens. We're on that Tokina 11-16 that I've been talking about, which is an f2.8 lens, and we're at ISO 800. The audio is the exact same that you just heard from my Sony a7 III. It's the exact same microphone and all that plugged straight into the camera. But this is the image quality you could expect to get out of the SL3. And again, I think it's fantastic. Like, we're in 1080p 30 frames per second. It just works. Like, I can tell that the autofocus has got me. Something that I did get wrong when I talked about this video before is, look, you can actually see the audio levels when you have it plugged into a microphone. I don't know why it didn't show up last time though. It shows up now, but it didn't show up when we did the test during the initial video on Monday. So I don't know why I did that, but that is very important. That makes this a lot easier to recommend as an online content creator camera. You want to see everything that you can do. But yeah, this is the image quality you can expect to get. I think the SL3 is perfectly fine if you don't need that 24 frames per second. If you are fine with 1080p 30, which is what I recorded on for like 2 years during this YouTube journey of mine, this is probably going to turn into my favorite webcam currently on the market. Like, what other camera can give you clean HDMI out with a mini HDMI with good video, good specs, great autofocus? There's not very many cameras out there. Even my beloved A6400 does not have the connection that this has. But yeah, this has been the indoor image quality. Back to the video. And we're back. So we've seen how good the image quality looks again. I think it's pretty awesome. But what about how easy is the SL3 to use? And like Canon's other cameras, it's incredibly easy to use. It's got the mode dial on top. It has one single selector dial on the top. I wish it was more, but again, it's a budget camera. It has enough customization, has enough physical buttons and dials that you can use to make it easy enough. But the big benefit, especially when you talk about a Canon camera like this, is it's got the awesome touchscreen. We'll talk more about this in fiddliness in just a second, but I really like the Canon touchscreen because when you have the Canon touchscreen, one of the things that just makes it easier is when you're in front of the camera, sometimes you have to change up what you're doing, right? Well, like right now, if I have a problem with this camera, I'd have to get up, walk around the camera, change it, come back, sit back down. If I'm on something like the SL3, I can just look at it. Hey, here's my shutter speed. Oh, I need to change it. Okay, here's my aperture. Well, I'd like a little shallower depth of field. Okay, my ISO, ooh, I'm too overexposed. I need to drop it into auto, or I need to drop it into I need to change the exposure compensation. Like, you have access to that on a camera like this, where you don't on this. And that is a hugely beneficial piece of technology. Like, it really is important. The camera also feels good, much like the SL2. It is made of a cheaper plastic body. Can you guys hear that? Can you guys hear that? So, but it's got enough of this rubber grip on the side, so it doesn't feel like it would fall out of the hand. It actually feels pretty darn good in the hand. Like, I don't feel like I would drop this. I mean, I guess I drop a lot of stuff. I feel like it would be harder to drop this than normal. I mean, it is pretty secure. It feels pretty darn good in the hand. I like the little thumb grip right here. But we've talked about ease of use. Now let's talk about what's most important to me, fiddliness. Now, what's the difference between ease of use and fiddliness? Fiddliness is how easy is the camera to use after you hit record. We could spend all day long setting this camera up, but once we hit record, we just gotta get to work, right? The big things that I'm really looking for when it comes to fiddliness: good stabilization, good autofocus, touch screen that I can interact with from the front. And like we already saw, the touchscreen in the front is really great. And also, like we saw during the vlogging test, the autofocus is fantastic. Look at that. It's got eye autofocus, and that's the big selling point, like we talked during the video specs. This is the big selling point that the SL3 has over something like the SL2, is it has eye autofocus even in video. And that's a rare camera to do that. Not too many other cameras can do that. The EOS R can now do it. The Fujifilm X-T30 and X-T3 can do it. Panasonic cameras can technically do it, but they still have that contrast-based autofocus, so it's not as good. So being able to have eye autofocus while in video is incredible. Is it worth giving up the 24 frames per second? That's something that you're gonna have to decide on your own, but I do think this is one of the least fiddly cameras currently out there, especially at the price point. And that's something that Canon just does right. They make some of the least fiddly cameras I've ever used. Like, straight up, some of the least fiddly cameras you can get on the market are Canon cameras. There's a reason why Canon has such a big share of the YouTuber camera space, is they just make stuff that's easy to use. A lot of things about YouTube is we don't want to mess around. We don't have time to like make these big productions. We just want to create content, get it out there. This does that really well. So we've talked about the image quality. We've seen how easy or hard it is to get that image quality. But if we want to grow with this camera, we want to get some new lenses. What does the ecosystem or upgrade path look like? So the SL3 can use Canon's EF and EFS lens lineup, which basically means the largest lens selection on the planet Earth. Like, this is the Tokina 11 to 16 2.8, which is one of my favorite APS-C lenses of all time. I wish this was available on every mount. This is 11 to 16 2.8 that's very reasonably priced. But yeah, you can use that. You can use Canon's full frame lenses. You can use a billion third-party lenses. Like, there is no problem if you want to get a lens for this camera. There is thousands of lenses. And you can go to places like the Canon refurbished website, where you can get a great deal on Canon slightly used lenses. Like, it's got a huge ecosystem. Like, one thing that I will never say about Canon, especially when it comes to the DSLR, when it comes to the mirrorless, a little bit different situation, like just like Nikon mirrorless. They don't have the mirrorless lens lineup yet. This has the most lens selection you're gonna find. So we've talked about all this stuff. I've said a lot of great things about the SL3. Should you buy one? Probably not. The only reason I would recommend this over something else like the M50, which is smaller, the same price, is a mirrorless camera that I like a lot. Has much smaller lenses. You can also adapt the exact same lenses that we just talked about, or the SL2 if you really want that 24 frames per second. The real thing that I would say you should get the SL3 is if you want to use this as a travel live streaming camera. Like we said, you can get clean HDMI out from a $500 body with great autofocus, great image quality, great lens selection. Like, that's incredible. With the M50, if you want to do clean HDMI out, you have to do some workarounds where you have to disable the autofocus. Not so here. You can just use this. It's incredibly easy to use. It's got that better connection, which just makes it easier to do for live streaming purposes. If you're not looking for a live streaming or a web camera, I would not recommend the SL3. Yeah, the eye autofocus is great. Yeah, the stabilization is great. I don't know. I would love to recommend this, but I can only recommend this as a web camera. Let me know what you guys think. Leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your opinions on the Canon SL3. Thanks for watching.